Hello and welcome to Educated STEM. I am Kate, the founder of Educated STEM, and today I thought we would progress since we've done a series on how to be successful on graduate school and what comes after graduate school. I'm sure lots of you are thinking, oh, that's a postdoc, but it doesn't have to be. So let's dive in to whether you should do a postdoc. So the first question is, what is a postdoc? So let's get into the actual definition, and this comes from the National Postdoctoral Association's website. And it says, postdoctoral scholars, or postdocs, are individuals in a defined period of mentored training following the achievement of their terminal degrees, like a PhD, an MD, something like that. So it is by definition a training position, and that might feel absolutely ridiculous depending on how long it took for you to get your terminal degree. So in the UK, you can get a PhD in 3, maybe 4 years. That might be longer in certain countries. In America, the average is around 5 years, but I have met PhD students who've taken up to a decade in order to finish. So you have probably published in your area. You might be seen as a world expert in your very narrow field of research. But as far as people in the academy are concerned, you're still a trainee. You aren't ready to be a professor or to go through the academic route. And so, 50 years ago, postdocs didn't really exist. People did their PhD and then kind of slotted straight into a faculty position. But now I'm sure you are aware that there are not a lot of faculty positions or professor positions available anymore. And so it's become more of a rite of passage that you finish your terminal degree and then you do a postdoc or 2, or in some cases 3. And then, you're trying to get one of these faculty positions. And whether you get one is often, luck of the draw. You could have excellent publications, you can have research grants and other things. But sometimes, there's just not that many positions open. So many people are applying for it and you don't get it. So the postdoc, which leads to all of this, usually as a postdoctoral scholar, you will work for someone. You'll work for a principal investigator or a PI, the term is in America, who leads a lab, decides probably on your research direction. They might give you a question to tackle, or they might have done some previous work on it. They give you a short-term contract, which could be a few years. I would definitely say it's going to be a maximum of 5 years. And when you finish your contract, you are expected to move on. So it's a short-term training contract where you can continue to harness your skills and develop them so that theoretically, if you were then to move on into the professoriate, that you could then run your own lab. There's another kind of postdoc, which is usually called a postdoc fellow. These are in a slightly different category because you've probably got your own funding. So you've either written a fellowship application or you have been accepted by an institution as a fellow and they're going to fund your research. And that's like the holy grail. So most postdocs would want this kind of position, but they're not, there's not that many of them. They're very hard to get, especially if you get your own funding. So usually when we refer to postdocs, I'm talking about the first set, those who are working under a professor doing the research that is designed, or the professor has a lot of input into. So you're still kind of working on someone. You might have a little autonomy, but you're definitely not, you don't have a lot of academic freedom yet. So there are going to be multiple points in favor and against you completing a postdoc, and I'm going to talk to you about both of these now. And what I want you to think about is, doing a postdoc might seem like the next step. Probably your graduate student cohorts are talking about, moving on to a postdoc. It's almost seen as the default. You've got your PhD, now what do you do? But you know, there's something that the NYU postdocs have, and they say, "What can you be with a PhD?" Thanks, NYU. That's catchy. And in fact, if you want to think about that, they hold a conference every 2 years, and they discuss all the different things that you can utilize and put your PhD towards. So I would encourage you to go to that conference if you're able to. But there are many different things that you can turn to. You can continue to do research just outside of the academy. There are many different things that you can do. But please take an active decision and career steps to know what you want to do. Don't just passively wait and hope that something comes along. So I'm going to encourage you to read this book. I think it's fabulous. I really cannot say more encouragement than that. This book is the bee's knees. So it's called Next Gen PhD, A Guide to Career Paths in Science, and it's by Melanie Sinche. So here's the book. And if you go to the back cover, all it says about Melanie is that she is the Director of Education at the Jackson Laboratory for Genomic Medicine. It's one little sentence, but Melanie is so much more than that. So I'm going to tell you all about Melanie now and encourage you to read this book. So Melanie is a nationally recognized leader in career development for graduate students and postdocs with over 20 years of experience in the field. She is a certified career counselor and author focused on careers for PhDs across all disciplines. Now, where has she worked? Because she has got some serious accolades and big names in here. So she was the founding director of the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs at Harvard University. She had the same role at the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs for the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She worked as a senior research associate at the Labor and Work-Life program in Harvard Law School, analyzing data collected through a survey study entitled Identifying Career Pathways for PhDs in Science. And she shares those results in this book, which is published by the Harvard University Press. As mentioned in the book, she served as the Director of Education for the Jackson Laboratory for Genomic Medicine, and she is currently the Director of Career and Professional Development in the Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Affairs at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. So, trust me, Melanie knows what she's talking about, and this book is fab. So, if you're finishing your graduate studies, even if you've done a postdoc and you're thinking what to do next, I encourage you to read this book, as it's going to tell you a bunch of different things. Okay, so now that I've greatly endorsed that book, what postdoc positions are available? Because you're probably thinking of the academic postdoc when you think of postdocs, and there are more than just that. So, what is an academic postdoc? It's probably going to look and feel very similar to your graduate studies. It's going to be at a university or a research institute, and it's going to allow you to continue to perform research, publish papers, write grants and fellowship applications, maybe teaching and mentoring others, all in an environment that you are very familiar and presumably comfortable with. And when you were a graduate student, you might have seen postdocs kind of amble in and out at all times of day and night. And, that's because they have a little bit more autonomy perhaps than a graduate student has. So yes, if you want to have a little bit more freedom about the timing that you can come to work, then an academic postdoc is usually a bit more relaxed than other types. But at the same time, this is going to be easy for you to find, especially if you stay in the same field. You're comfortable, you know the people, you might have someone that you really want to work for. And so it should be relatively easy for you to move from your graduate studies into an academic postdoc. So that's great, that's a plus. But what are the downsides? Well, you're not going to get paid an awful lot. You're going to get paid more than you did at graduate school, but you're still not going to be running to the bank, particularly happy. The benefits are going to be a bit better than you had as a graduate student, but you can get better benefits other places. You might feel isolated, especially if you've moved to a new institution or a new country. That is the one fantastic thing about an academic postdoc is you can travel the world, you can get a visa, and you can go and do your research. Either because you are in the same field or you're still learning a new field or technique, and that will allow you to get the visa. It could also lead to overwork and burnout because this postdoc is going to be a very short period of time. And therefore, trying to crank out the publications and doing the experiments, you're going to be pushing pretty hard. So it can be challenging. But again, an academic postdoc is probably what you immediately think of. You might think of an industry postdoc, but I know very few people who have done these. And there's, all of the big biopharmaceutical companies or pharmaceutical companies you can think of will probably have some kind of industry postdoc. So, go and have a look at their websites. I actually have a document which is about whether you should do your PhD, and I have the links for a bunch of different companies listed in this document. It is available on Patreon at Educated STEM. It will cost you a whole $3. So if you can think about the cost of a coffee, you can get this list and it will save you some time. So an industry postdoc could be a fabulous way of getting into a company. Just note that some companies might be excited to keep you. They've trained you. They want to keep that expertise in-house. But others absolutely will not employ someone who has done a postdoc with them. And you're going to have to figure out which companies do either or. So just because you're in doesn't mean that you're staying, but all of those skills that you have just, kind of improved or built on during your industry postdoc will allow you to move into a different company. So it's not all lost. The good news is these are going to pay much better than academic postdoc. You're going to have way better benefits, including things like relocation expenses, annual bonuses, which would be fairly exciting, and retirement matching, which means that if you pay into your retirement fund, they will also match up to a certain amount. So that's pretty cool. Because you're working for a company, you're probably going to have amazing facilities to work in. And because you're in a slightly different kind of environment, you can going to learn an awful lot, especially about the business side. So if you think, at some point I might not want to do research anymore, but the business aspect, whether it's in kind of, I don't know, some sort of writing or managing processes or something else, you can learn all of those different things whilst you do the postdoc. The things that I think are the best about industry postdocs is they're going to be much more structured than an academic postdoc. And I love structure, so I think this is a good thing, but you might disagree with me. So these are going to have absolute set timeframes. There's going to be formal training and explicit expectations. So what are your goals? Are you meeting them? Publishing, participation in meetings and conferences, and professional development. So if that all sounds good to you, then obviously an industry postdoc could be fabulous. Plus, most of these companies have locations in different countries. So again, this might lead to you having the ability to try and live somewhere else that you're not familiar with. Now, possibly my favorite kind of postdoc is a government postdoc. What is that? So again, there's less of them than academic postdocs, and you can find them fairly easily. You just have to go and look at things like national research institutes. So the National Institutes of Health, the National Cancer Institute, something like that, or any of the national labs. There's a bunch of them. So like Argonne or Brookhaven, Lawrence Livermore, Oak Ridge. You can literally find the national labs website and just kind of click on them and find out what they have available. So what makes these government postdocs a good idea for you? Again, they're going to have higher pay, better benefits, and just like the the academic postdocs, they will absolutely employ international candidates. So, if you're international, this could be a great fit for you. The downsides is that you're probably not going to be writing any grants and you won't be teaching. So if you want to go kind of the ivory tower route, you want to become a teaching professor or a research professor, this government postdoc is not going to allow you to build and prove those skills. So this might not help you if that is your career route. The next idea or the next grouping of postdocs is a teaching postdoc. So this is for someone who wants to do teaching potentially after their postdoc. So you're going to do some research, but at the same time, they are going to teach you how to teach. So they're going to teach you things about pedagogy and classroom management and how to be an effective teacher, things like that. So the easiest way to find these is to simply pop into Google teaching postdoctoral fellowship, and you'll see a lot of them will come up. You might also want to look at something called an Iracta, or the Institutional Research and Academic Career Development Award. Sometimes they're under that umbrella term as the program that will train you. So again, teaching postdocs, if you think you want to become sort of teacher, eventually this could be for you. And then the final group of postdocs that I'm going to talk about are the field-specific postdocs. And really the most well-known of these is the American Association for the Advancement of Science Fellowships, or a AAAS Fellow. And there are two different kinds here. The first is Science and Technology Policy Fellowships, and the second is a Mass Media Science and Engineering Fellowship. Now, there are a lot of different positions available in both of these categories. It goes up once a year. They're very competitive, but I can tell you that previous fellows are super generous with their time. And so if you reach out to someone on LinkedIn and express that you're interested in one of these, I'm sure that many of them will be happy to talk to you about their experiences and maybe give you some advice on how to have a successful application. So now we've talked about all the different kinds of postdoc that you could do. What are the reasons for doing a postdoc? So my main thought is you love your research area and you want to continue. In the same vein, you have done research in your field and there's absolutely someone in your field that you really, really want to learn from. This person, is the bee's knees and you absolutely want to learn from them or learn a technique from them or something like that. That is the best reason to do a postdoc as far as I'm concerned, because if you're not excited about your research area, why are you doing it? The next is that you want to establish yourself with your own research ideas. So this might also go hand in hand with you applying for your own funding. And you need to differentiate yourself from your graduate school mentor. So you're probably going to be working in a different lab, potentially in a different institute, because you need to show people that you are now independent and able to do research kind of without your mentor helping you. And this is obviously a great step if you want to continue and be a professor. The next is that you want to become a professor or teaching faculty at a university or research institute. And that even though your chances of becoming one are slim, that you want to go for it, you want to get those extra publications and grant writing experience. So you're going to do another postdoc. Just fine, that's great. Just know that the skills that you're going to kind of continue to improve whilst you're doing a postdoc will also be leverageable outside of either being a professor or the academy. All of those transferable skills are going to be very, very, very useful depending on what you want to do. Now, this might not be something that you consider, but maybe you had a pretty terrible experience during your graduate school, whether you had issues with your research or your PI or the lab members or the graduate school, you never know. And so, you've invested this time and you're not sure if you just don't want to do research anymore or if it was just you had a bad experience. So again, I think that's a valid reason to do a postdoc and to really consider if this is something that you want to continue in the future. Another reason is that you want to diversify your skill set by learning new techniques or maybe changing your research focus. Again, either of those things might lead you to be more successful in your career path. And again, are solid reasons for doing a postdoc. And then I mentioned this earlier, but you want to live internationally. And a postdoc is a fantastic way of being able to do that. Obviously, I am British, and so I did postdocs in the UK. And then the easiest way for me to come to America was to do yet another postdoc. So I did. And I got to move here and obviously haven't left yet. But again, it is temporary. So if you decide that you want to stay, you are going to need to figure out a mechanism and how you can do that. So now we've covered all of the reasons, I think, about why you might want to do a postdoc. If I have forgotten some, please mention them in the comments below because I don't want to miss anything out. So, what are the reasons against doing a postdoc? Now, my first reason, a lot of the time you see it in a pro column. I think that it is a con. Because it is the obvious path which your peers and your mentors might be pushing you towards, it's kind of the default. This is the easiest way for you to move on. You've invested all of this time. Why would you want to leave research? Or, I think you could be a fantastic professor, and the next step is to do this. So you feel pressured to do a postdoc. But really, do you definitely want to do one? Only you can answer that. So you're going to have to do some self-reflection because, doing some self-reflection now will definitely help you in the future. If this is not something that you're passionate about or that you feel that you ought to do, then, you can stop it now. You don't have to do a few years before coming to the same conclusion. So save some time, do some really, kind of heartfelt thinking right now on your values and your skill set and what you want to do, and make the choice. If a postdoc isn't your next step, that's okay. The next one is similar. Your friends and family are like, well, you've done a PhD now. What are you going to do that for? If you don't do research, why did you do it? You've wasted all that time. You've got these skills and you're not going to use them. What is the point? So again, you have learned so much stuff during your graduate studies, and you can use those transferable skills doing many different other things. So it's not going to go to waste. And frankly, you might be happier not doing more research. So if that's the case, let's figure out what will make you happy and let's go do it. Similar, a postdoc is a continuation of maybe your graduate school experience. So you might have more autonomy, but are you definitely going to be building new skills? Are you going to be improving things that are going to be transferable? Or, if you come in basically or if you leave as you come in, then really you're just spinning your wheels doing, research time on someone else's project, and it's not really benefiting you in any way. So why do it? If you want to transfer to an industry role, I remember back, more than a decade ago, people would tell me, oh, they want you to have a little bit more research experience. So, definitely do a postdoc and then apply to work for a company. And then I found out that that's not true. The company would prefer to kind of mold you how they want. So you're probably better off applying to work for a company right out the gate. So let's go, finish your graduate studies and then apply for a company. You can always reach out to people who work in a position that you're interested in a company and ask, at your company, is this true? Or would they prefer it if I had a postdoc? Obviously, if they say, we'd like you to come in a little bit more experienced, then go and do another postdoc. But if you, did a longer PhD, then you might have already had enough experience in order to be considered. So remember, any delay in beginning at a company may lead you to become less desirable rather than increasing your market value and your employability. So just find out, ask some questions, ask, the different people in your network what they think. I think it's better to go straight for it. If you know you don't want to pursue a research career, then why would you do a postdoc? Again, I think that this is just, a comfortable route. You know that you can get a job, it's safe, but it's just putting off doing the hard work, figuring out what you want to do, and actually, pulling the trigger and going off and doing what it is that you want to do. Now, let's just talk about, finances. You're not going to be paid an awful lot of money as a postdoc. You're going to get paid more in either a governmental or an industry postdoc, but it's still not a lot of money. You might see people who you went to high school with and they don't even necessarily have a higher degree and they're earning far more money than you, which can be a little bit distressing. So, again, what are your life circumstances? It might not make financial sense for you to do a postdoc. So, just think about that. I don't want you to get into more debt because you are just kind of blindly following the path that your mentor or someone else has laid out for you. And you might be ready to have a permanent or a long-term contract. And there's nothing wrong with that. Stability isn't bad. You might have moved a number of times for your undergraduate degree, maybe a master's for your PhD. So, you might have lived in 3 different places, or cities, countries even. Um, so, you want some stability, that's fine too. Let's do that. Stability is not a postdoc. It is a temporary training position. So again, think about it before you decide that's what you want to do. So now that we've discussed the pros and cons of a postdoc, you need to do the hard work of reflecting about your skill set, your values. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? Because you might be in the exact same position, just 5 years older, if you haven't done this step before you take a postdoc. So, again, are you willing to make some sacrifices for long-term gain? Or are you done putting your life on hold and you simply want to move on to something more stable? Either of those is good, but is it good enough for you? Only you can answer that. So once you've done your self-reflection, you'll be able to answer the question, should you do a postdoc? And the answer might be different for you versus other people, and that is okay. As long as you are happy, please just don't do a postdoc because you feel you ought to, or you feel pressured by a mentor, your peers, or a family member. It's not a good idea. So I hope that helps. Just to give you a little bit of history, I have done a few postdocs in my time. I did one at the University of Sheffield for a couple of years before moving to the University of Oxford for just short of 3 years. And then, as I mentioned, I wanted to move to America. Guess what? I did another postdoc. But I will say my final postdoc was pretty cool because I became involved in my institution's postdoctoral association, which led me to the National Postdoctoral Association, which I mentioned earlier. And I was on their board of directors for 6 years and was ultimately the chair of the board. So I do know a little bit about being a postdoc and advising them. So I hope that this video is helpful. Again, I do have the document available on my Patreon page if it will be helpful to you. Please go and download it. It will cost you, again, $3 whole. So please do so. Please like and subscribe to the channel. And I will put up a longer version of this video on Patreon explaining some of my experiences with my postdoc, just for kind of your learning and to see what you should or should not avoid. And I'm going to put up another video soon, which is about you have a postdoc offer and is it good for you? Should you be looking at that? Is it a good option or not? So thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.